My own son broke my ribs over money I hadn't even spent. That was the sentence echoing through my head as I lay on the cold gravel of my front yard, gasping for air. The pain radiated through my chest like fire, and for a moment, I couldn't even scream. Logan towered over me, his face red, his breath stinking of beer and rage. His hands were still trembling, whether from guilt or adrenaline, I couldn't tell. The same hands I once held when he was 5 years old, guiding him across the street, now clenched like weapons. I remember the exact sound my ribs made, a dull, sickening crack, and the thought that came right after, this can't be my child. But it was. And that's where my story begins. I'm Olivia Byrne, 63 years old. I used to be a mechanical engineer for an aerospace company, the kind that designs flight control systems and landing gear solid practical, all logic and precision. For decades, I built things that flew. Now I build my mornings. Every day starts at 5:30 a.m., sharp, a habit left over from my working years. I still wake up before the sun, boil water for my black coffee, and listen to the radio humming from the counter. The local station, KBOI 670, has the same anchor it did 20 years ago. Somehow that comforts me. My house sits just outside Boise, Idaho, where the air smells of pine and diesel, and the winters bite at your bones but keep you honest. It's small, a log cabin Patrick built with his own hands when he retired from the Air Force. The walls creak when the wind shifts, but I've always found the sound loyal. Patrick has been gone for 8 years now. A sudden heart attack took him while he was repairing an old snowblower in the shed. The kind of man who'd rather fix something for 3 hours than buy a new one. That was Patrick, stubborn, loyal, proud. Since his passing, I've lived alone. I don't mind it, really. I've got my garden rows of tomatoes, zucchini, and the lavender that refuses to die even in frost. I've got my chickens who cluck like judgmental neighbors when I'm late feeding them. And I've got the radio, the hum of familiarity. What I don't have are expectations. Not anymore. Logan and my daughter Tessa live their city lives hours away. They call when it's convenient, visit on holidays if their schedules and moods allow. I used to miss them terribly. These days I just miss who they used to be. Behind my cabin stretches 20 acres of dry, overgrown land that once belonged to Patrick's parents. An abandoned airfield, mostly weeds, rusted fences, and a strip of cracked concrete where fighter planes used to land during the 1960s. For years, everyone saw it as worthless, a place coyotes crossed at night and kids used for target practice. But to me, it was Patrick's legacy. Selling it always felt like betrayal. Still, time has a way of changing how you see things. One morning, I was trimming dead branches by the fence when Nora Fields, my neighbor, yelled from across the dirt road. "Morning, Liv, heard the city's been sniffing around your land. Planning to build another one of those fancy gated communities," I laughed, wiping sweat from my forehead. "They said it's prime land for development." I said, "Sure, if you like tumbleweeds and rust." Nora cackled, hands on her hips. She's 70, widowed, even longer than I am, with hair the color of powdered sugar and the spirit of a teenage prankster. She's the kind of woman who bakes casseroles when she's bored and spreads gossip like frosting. "Well," she said, winking, "don't let them talk you into anything. City folks see a patch of dirt and start dreaming of profit." I nodded. They can dream all they want. I'm not selling. At least that's what I thought then. It was 2 weeks later when the man in the gray suit arrived. I was sitting on the porch reading an old aviation magazine when a silver Lexus pulled up the dirt road, a sight so out of place it looked like a UFO landing on gravel. The man stepped out, polished shoes, tie-straight clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Byrne?" he asked, flashing a practiced smile. "My name's Mr. Caldwell. I represent Meridian Development Group." The name sounded important, expensive, trouble. He explained in that corporate tone people use when they're rehearsing that the company had been eyeing the land near the decommissioned airfield for a new residential community. 20 acres of flat terrain close to the highway, perfect for infrastructure. He said, his words crisp as currency. I almost laughed. Flat terrain, honey, that lands a swamp every spring. You'll need a submarine, not a bulldozer. But he kept talking, undeterred. We're prepared to make a serious offer. $190,000. The porch went silent. Even the chickens stopped clucking. I blinked at him. "Did you say 190? "Yes, ma'am." 190,000. Cash payment, no contingencies, no negotiation necessary. For a moment, I thought he was joking. The land had been sitting there for decades, half wild, half forgotten. Patrick and I used to joke it was worth less than our lawnmower. But this man wasn't joking. He handed me a brochure digital renderings of shiny cul-de-sacs and fake lakes with names like Eagle's Nest Estates. I didn't even know whether to laugh or faint. That night, I sat by the window, the paperwork spread across the table, the radio whispering softly in the background. Patrick's photo sat beside my coffee cup, smiling the same easy smile he always had before takeoff. "What do you think, Patrick?" I asked out loud. "Sell the swamp." The house stayed quiet except for the clock ticking above the sink. Part of me wanted to hold on to the memories, to the promise we'd made to keep the land in the family. But another part, the practical engineer inside me, whispered, "It's just property. Memories don't pay taxes." I imagined fixing the roof, replacing the leaking pipes, maybe buying a used truck that didn't rattle like a shopping cart. I imagined traveling to Seattle to see Tessa's salon or flying east to see my grandchildren. For the first time in years, the future didn't look like survival. It looked like possibility. Still, I told no one. Not Nora, not the kids. Some instincts never retire, and mine told me silence was safer. I signed the preliminary papers a week later. The money would arrive soon after the legal transfer. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt something heavier, like the weight of a storm forming just beyond the horizon. Because deep down, I knew money doesn't change who people are. It just shows you who they've been hiding. And in my case, I was about to find out the hard way. I don't think I breathed for a full minute after that man left. $190,000. The number hung in my kitchen like a ghost. I kept repeating it under my breath while staring at the papers he'd left on the counter, as if saying it enough times might make it real or safe. I'd never seen that much money in my life, not even on paper. The last time I held a check over 5 digits was when Patrick got his Air Force pension payout, and even that felt like a miracle. This was something else. I paced the kitchen with my coffee mug clutched so tight my knuckles went white. The old floorboards creaked under every anxious step. Part of me wanted to call Nora right away because that's what we do, isn't it? Share the news, pour a cup of tea, let someone squeal on our behalf. But another voice inside whispered, "Not yet. Keep it to yourself." That voice was calm, precise, the engineer in me that never retired. Later that evening, I stood on the back porch watching the horizon swallow the last light of day. The air smelled faintly of rain and rust. I could still see the shape of the old runway, faded concrete lines, cutting through tall grass like scars that never healed. He said it was prime real estate, I murmured, shaking my head. I said it was an old helicopter pad with memories. The absurdity of it made me laugh, a soft, startled sound that died quickly in the air. It was true, though. That land wasn't just dirt. It was the backdrop of every argument Patrick and I ever had, every dinner we burned, every time we danced barefoot under fireworks on Independence Day. Selling it felt like handing a stranger our family album and saying, "Do what you want." Still, I signed the offer. The next morning, I locked the documents away inside an old metal box that had once held Patrick's flight tools. It was scuffed, dented, and heavy as regret. I slid the signed forms and property deed into a manila envelope, sealed it, and tucked it under the framed photo of Patrick in his flight jacket. Then I pushed the box under my bed. Inside it, alongside the papers, were a few of Patrick's medals and the wedding ring I stopped wearing when arthritis made my fingers swell. Somehow, it felt right, like keeping everything that once defined my life together in one small, guarded space. I knelt there for a moment, resting my hand on the cold metal lid. "Keep it safe for us, Pat," I whispered. "You always were better with locks." By lunchtime, I had almost convinced myself that the whole thing was routine. People sold land all the time. It wasn't a secret, it was just private. When Nora called that afternoon, I answered in my best, normal voice. "Hey, Liv," she said. "Saw a fancy car out front yesterday. You having your house appraised or planning to elope with a banker?" I chuckled. "Neither. Just some paperwork nonsense. You know how it is." She hummed suspiciously. "Paperwork nonsense always means money dear, and money means trouble. I'm fine, Nora. I'm sure you are. Still, if you ever do strike gold, hide it before your kids start Googling power of attorney." That made me laugh, a sharp, belly-deep laugh that felt good and strange all at once. "Noted," I said, still smiling. But after I hung up, the smile faded. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw numbers. 190,000. I imagined the money like a living thing pulsing quietly in a bank, somewhere waiting for me. I pictured all the things I could finally fix: the roof that leaked every spring, the faded blue paint on the porch, the bathroom tiles that had started to peel at the corners. And yet beneath the practical thoughts, there was something else, something electric and uneasy, like the feeling before a storm when the air tastes metallic and the birds go silent. I turned on the lamp, opened my bedside drawer, and took out Patrick's pocket watch. The second hand ticked steadily, unbothered, as if reminding me that time moves with or without permission. Maybe it was silly, but I whispered to it anyway. "What would you do, old man? Take the offer or chase me out of the house for even thinking about it?" The watch ticked on, stubborn and silent. A week later, the transaction was finalized. Meridian Development wired the money directly to my account. When I checked my balance online, I nearly spilled coffee over the keyboard. The number glowed on the screen. 6 figures, clean, crisp, impossible. I closed the laptop as if I could trap the secret inside. That's when I decided no one could know. Not yet. Not until I figured out what to do with it. I didn't tell Tessa, who would see dollar signs faster than affection. I didn't tell Logan, who still thought budgeting meant buying cheaper beer. And I didn't even tell Nora, though. Every time she stopped by with muffins and gossip, I had to bite my tongue not to spill everything. For the next few days, life pretended to be normal. I still woke at 5:30, still fed the chickens, still listened to the morning forecast about snow that never came. But under that calm routine was a pulse. I couldn't silence a quiet hum of tension, like an engine idling beneath the floorboards. I started locking my doors twice. I started checking the mailbox before dawn as if the envelopes might gossip about me. And at night, I'd glance toward the bed, where the metal box lay hidden like a buried heart. Every so often, I'd imagine Tessa's curious smile or Logan's careless questions. "How much did you get, Mom? What are you going to do with it?" And each time a shiver ran down my spine. Maybe Nora was right. Money attracts trouble the way porch lights attract moths. 3 nights after the sale, Nora and I sat on my porch with tea, watching the stars blink above the pine trees. She was rambling about her nephew's new girlfriend, a yoga teacher who believed in manifesting abundance. "Well," Nora said, waving her mug dramatically, "I'd like to manifest a little abundance myself. Maybe I'll marry rich next time." "You'd need to marry alive first," I teased. She cackled so hard she nearly spilled her drink. "Don't tempt me, Liv. If the universe is listening, I might get a banker in a hearse." We both laughed until we ran out of breath. Then she leaned closer, voice dropping. "All jokes aside, honey, if you ever come into some money, keep it quiet. People change faster than weather when cash is involved." I smiled, half amused, half unsettled. "You worry too much." "No," she said, her eyes glinting in the porch light. "I just know too much." Her words lingered long after she went home. Later that night, as I turned off the lights and crawled into bed, I caught my reflection in the window, an older woman with careful eyes and a secret she wasn't ready to share. Somewhere beneath me, the metal box sat still and silent. I smiled faintly to myself, not knowing why. Maybe because the house finally felt alive again. Maybe because silence had become its own kind of power. Or maybe, though I didn't realize it then, because every quiet decision carries its own echo, and mine was already beginning to make noise. When my doorbell rang that Sunday afternoon, I was still in my pajamas, sipping lukewarm coffee and trying to fix a loose button on my flannel shirt. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not her. Through the front window, I saw a white Tesla, parked crookedly in my gravel driveway, its wheels sinking slightly into the dirt. And stepping out, balancing a box wrapped in pastel tissue paper, was my daughter Tessa, in a fur-lined jacket, sunglasses bigger than her face and heels, so tall they probably violated some aviation rule I used to enforce. She looked like she'd just stepped out of a commercial for perfume called Entitlement. "Mom," she sang, waving one manicured hand as if she were greeting paparazzi instead of her mother. I opened the door, caught between shock and suspicion. "Tessa Byrne, is that really you? What brings the city royalty all the way to my humble kingdom of mud?" She laughed lightly, air-kissing both my cheeks, but somehow missing both. "Oh, Mom, you and your jokes. Can a daughter visit her mother without a reason?" "Yes," I said, "but history suggests otherwise." She breezed past me, her designer boots clicking against my worn floorboards. The scent of her perfume, a sharp citrus that could wake the dead, filled the living room within seconds. She set the pastel box on the table. "I brought you something homemade pie, organic, gluten-free, and baked with love." I eyed the crust. It looked like someone had tried to patch a tire with it. "Organic, huh?" I said, cutting a small slice. "What flavor avocado lime kale?" she announced proudly. "It's trending in Seattle." "Of course it is," I muttered, chewing slowly. It tasted like ambition, dry, bitter, and slightly burnt. I swallowed hard and smiled. "Tastes like ambition." Her face lit up. "See, I knew you'd appreciate the health benefits." "Oh, I appreciate something," I said under my breath. She perched on the couch, crossing her legs with the kind of practiced grace you only learn from yoga or manipulation. "So, Mom," she began sweetly, "I heard the funniest thing from Mrs. Betty. You know, the one with the nose for everyone else's business." I felt my chest tighten. Betty should consider a new hobby. "Well," Tessa continued, twirling her hair like it held the secrets of the universe, "she said someone from the city came by about your property. You didn't tell me you were thinking of selling." I stared at her over my coffee mug. Maybe because I wasn't thinking, I was deciding. She blinked momentarily, thrown off. "Oh, so it's true then. You did sell?" I said nothing, but silence has a way of confessing things. Words never need to. Her smile widened, the kind of smile that always came right before she asked for something. "You must be thrilled," she said, leaning closer. "Finally, some money to enjoy your life. Take a cruise, get a new car, or, invest in family." There it was. The word family, her favorite disguise for me. "Tessa," I said gently, "what do you actually want?" She laughed, feigning offense. "Mom, I'm hurt you'd even ask that, because you've never come here without wanting something." She sighed dramatically. "Okay, fine. You're impossible." She reached into her tote bag, pulled out a glossy folder, and slid it across the coffee table. "This is the new layout for my salon, Tessa Byrne Studios. The bank loves my vision, but they're being slow about the loan. I just need something temporary, say $25,000 to get the renovation started." I raised an eyebrow. $25,000? "That's not a loan, sweetheart. That's a lifestyle correction." Her mouth tightened. "It's an investment, Mom. You'd be helping me grow. You always said women should be independent." "Yes, and I also said they should learn the difference between independent and entitled." She blinked, hurt, flickering behind her eyes for a second before the performance resumed. "You think I'm entitled? I think I said that you came here in a Tesla to borrow money from someone who drives a truck with duct tape on the bumper." Her smile vanished. "You don't have to make me feel guilty for being successful. I'm not. I'm just wondering how you measure success, by effort or by volume." She crossed her arms. "You know, this is exactly why I don't visit more often. You twist everything I say." "No," I said calmly. "I just listen longer than you expect." The air grew thick between us. The clock on the mantel ticked louder than usual. She looked around the house as if seeing it for the first time, dust motes, cracked windows, the faint smell of pine and coffee. "Mom," she said after a while, her voice lower now, "you're not getting any younger." I just want to make sure you're taken care of. Money sitting around can attract the wrong kind of people. I gave a small laugh. Funny. That's exactly what I was thinking. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Are you calling me the wrong kind of people? I didn't answer. She exhaled sharply, standing up, adjusting her fur collar like armor. You always think the worst of me. I stood too steady but tired. Tessa, you didn't drive 5 hours from Seattle for pie and conversation. You came for information or maybe a check. Either way, you'll leave disappointed. Her tone sharpened. You're being unfair. Unfair, I said softly. When you were 12, I worked nights so you could have braces. When you were 18, your father sold his metals to help pay for cosmetology school. And when you opened your first salon, I refinanced this house to co-sign your lease. Tell me, dear, which part of that was unfair? She had no answer. Her jaw trembled for half a second before pride stitched it shut again. You're too old to enjoy money anyway, she snapped. Maybe it's time someone else made it useful. That one cut deeper than she knew. For a long moment, I just looked at her. The perfect hair. The practiced smile, the daughter I used to think would hold my hand when I grew frail. Now I realized she was just waiting for me to loosen my grip. She picked up her bag and marched toward the door, her perfume trailing behind like smoke. Drive safe, I said. She stopped at the threshold, turned back with that bright, brittle smile that used to melt my heart when she was little. Now it only chilled me. Don't worry, Mom. I'll be fine. Just think about what I said. Then she was gone. Tires crunching down the driveway, the Tesla disappearing into a cloud of dust and silence. I stood by the window staring after her, one hand resting lightly on the curtain. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the tin roof like distant applause. Inside, I exhaled the truth I'd been avoiding. Tessa hadn't come for me. She'd come for what was mine, and for the first time, I stopped feeling guilty for keeping my secret. 3 days after Tessa's visit, I should have known the quiet wouldn't last. It never does. Silence is just the inhale before the storm. That morning, I was fixing a loose hinge on the kitchen cabinet when the sound of an engine groaned up my driveway, low, uneven, like a smoker's cough on wheels. I didn't even need to look. Only one truck in the world sounded that pitiful. Logan's Ford F-150 paint peeling like sunburnt skin came to a stop in front of my porch. The passenger door was dented in the bed, full of tangled cords, beer cans, and the ghosts of good decisions. He slammed the door shut and yelled, "Mom, you home?" I froze for half a second. Tessa had probably wasted no time dialing him up. She always did prefer company when cornering people. I wiped my hands on a rag, squared my shoulders, and stepped out to meet him. "Logan," I said evenly, "you could have called first. That truck alone gives the chickens anxiety." He grinned, showing teeth that looked like they'd been through 2 bar fights and a divorce. "Good to see you too, Ma." "Cut the charm," I said. "You never use it unless you want something." "Aw, don't say that. Maybe I just came to visit my favorite mother. I'm your only mother." "Exactly," he said, walking past me into the kitchen as if he still lived there. "All the more reason." He opened my fridge, grabbed a root beer, and popped the cap off with his belt buckle. "Heard you made a big sale," he said casually, his voice too smooth to be innocent. I leaned against the counter. "You've been talking to your sister." He smiled, satisfied that I knew. "She said you sold Dad's land." I didn't answer. "Dad's land." He repeated louder this time, letting the words stretch. "That property's our legacy, Ma. You can't just sell it off like a used lawnmower." "Legacy," I echoed, raising a brow. "You didn't even mow it once." That wiped the grin off his face. Tessa's voice floated in before I saw her. "Oh, don't start like that, Mom." She appeared at the door phone in hand, eyes gleaming with the confidence of someone who thought she'd already won. "I told Logan you'd probably overreact. We're not accusing you of anything, we just think this should be a family discussion." "Funny," I said, "because this family's been very quiet until now." Tessa crossed her arms, leaning against the doorway like she was posing for a magazine about bad timing. Look, Mom, we're just worried. You're living alone, getting older, and making big decisions. We just want to make sure you're okay. Logan nodded, his voice softer now. She's right, Ma. You can't handle all that money yourself. People take advantage of seniors. Oh, I agree, I said, my tone dry, especially when the people trying to take advantage happen to share my last name. Logan's eyes narrowed. That's not fair. What's not fair, I said, is both of you showing up here like repo agents and calling it love. Don't twist it, Tessa snapped. We're just saying that land was Dad's. He wanted it to stay in the family. I took a slow breath. Then you should have shown interest while he was alive. Because while I was paying taxes, pulling weeds, and fixing fences, none of you were there. Not once. Logan leaned forward on the table, voice dropping an octave. You can't guilt trip us forever. You raised us, sure, but that doesn't mean you own everything. Oh, sweetheart, I said, stepping closer. I don't own everything. Just the parts I built with my hands and my sanity. That's all that's left. His jaw tightened. So you're saying the money's yours alone? That's exactly what I'm saying. The silence between us turned thick enough to slice. Then, like a match to gasoline, Logan slammed his palm on the kitchen table. The sound cracked through the air, making my coffee cup jump. Damn it, Mom, stop being stubborn. Tessa winced but didn't stop him. Instead, she crossed her arms tighter, her lips curling. He's right. You can't even enjoy that money. You'll just sit here in this old cabin until it all goes to waste. Something in me snapped, not with rage, but with clarity. I straightened my back. You two talk about money like it's oxygen. You can't live without it, but you don't even know how to breathe right. Logan pushed away from the table, his chair screeching across the floor. We're trying to help. No, I said quietly. You're trying to collect. He took a step toward me. I could smell the beer on his breath, even though it was barely noon. His eyes were red, the kind of red that comes from a lifetime of blaming everyone else. Don't I warned, but he kept coming close enough for me to see the faint scar above his brow from when he fell off his bike at 10. The same boy, only angrier and older. For a second, I thought he might actually hit me. Then from outside the open window, a sharp voice cut through the tension. Hey! We all turned. Nora Field stood on the porch with her arms crossed, holding a watering can like a weapon. Save that drama for Judge Judy, kids. The absurdity of her timing was perfect. Tessa blinked. Logan froze. And I, God help me, laughed. The sound startled even me. Get out, I said finally, my voice steady now. Both of you. Mom, Tessa started. No, you had your say. Now you'll have your silence. Get out. Logan glared at me for a long moment, his jaw working like he wanted to chew the words before spitting them. Finally, he grabbed his keys, stormed toward the door, and brushed past Nora, who gave him a pointed look that could curdle milk. Tessa lingered, guilt flickering for a split second before pride smothered it. You'll regret this, she muttered. Maybe I said, but I'll regret it on my own terms. She rolled her eyes and followed her brother to the truck. The engine coughed, sputtered, and finally roared to life. Gravel sprayed across the yard as they drove off, dust cloud curling behind them like smoke from a warning flare. When the noise faded, the house went still again. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the old clock kept me company. Nora stepped inside, setting her watering can on the counter. You all right, Liv? I've been better, I said, rubbing the bridge of my nose. But I've also been worse. She gave a slow nod. They're like storm clouds, loud, messy, and always gone too soon. Still, I'd keep an umbrella handy. I managed a tired smile. I think I'll need a bunker, not an umbrella. Nora chuckled. Well, whatever's coming, you've got me next door. And my frying pan. Appreciated, I said, exhaling. But as I looked through the window and saw the tire tracks leading away, a chill crept down my spine. Because Logan's last look wasn't anger, it was promise. And promises like his never end quietly. 3 days passed before the phone rang again. It was Tessa. Her name lit up on the caller ID like a ghost I wasn't ready to face. I stared at the screen long enough for the ringing to almost stop before I picked up. Mom. Her voice was soft, syrupy, too polished to be casual. "Please don't hang up," I sighed. "Depends on what this is." "It's lunch," she said quickly. "Just lunch. I owe you an apology. Can we meet at Maple Diner around noon?" My treat. I hesitated. That diner had been our halfway point for years, neutral ground between my stubbornness and her pride. A place where we once shared pancakes and laughter before everything turned into negotiations. I wanted to believe she meant it. "Fine," I said at last. No arguments, no surprises. No surprises, she promised. She lied. Maple Diner hadn't changed in 20 years. The red vinyl booth still squeaked, the coffee still smelled like burnt hope, and the same waitress with the beehive hair still called everyone honey. When I walked in, the bell above the door jingled like it was warning me. Tessa was already there, hair perfect, nails shining, smile rehearsed. But she wasn't alone. Across from her sat Damian Reed, her husband. Former financial advisor, part-time manipulator, full-time disappointment. His suit probably cost more than my truck, and his cologne could knock out a horse. My stomach sank. "Tessa," I said carefully, sliding into the booth. "You brought company." She clasped her hands. "I thought it might be good to have Damian here. He's been helping me sort things out." "Ah," I said, forcing a smile. I didn't realize we were sorting anything. Damian grinned, that thin salesman grin that could sell ice to Alaska. "Always good to see you, Mrs. Byrne. You're looking well sturdy." "Thanks," I said flatly. I try to keep my bones attached. A waitress appeared. "Can I get you folks started before I could speak?" Damian raised a manicured hand. "3 waters, please. Tap's fine. We're watching the ladies' budget." Tessa's smile froze. Mine didn't move at all. When the waitress left, I leaned forward slightly. Well, that was charming. Damian laughed lightly. "Just a little humor. You know me. I try not to." Tessa kicked him under the table. I heard the dull thud, saw him wince, then smooth his expression back into polite arrogance. So I said, "What's this really about?" Tessa folded her napkin, avoiding eye contact. "Mom, we didn't mean to upset you the other day. Logan and I, well, we overreacted. We just worry. You've got so much going on, and after Dad." After Dad, I cut in, I learned to worry for myself. Her lips twitched, the faintest flash of irritation breaking through the sweetness. "We just want to make sure you're okay." Damian leaned in, resting his elbows on the table like a shark circling polite waters. "It's perfectly natural, Olivia. A woman living alone, suddenly in possession of, well, let's just say a sizable sum that attracts attention. Unsavory attention." I raised an eyebrow. "Unsavory, like what exactly?" He smiled, smooth and quiet, the kind that knocks on doors when you least expect it, the kind that reads obituaries for opportunities. Tessa gasped, slapping his arm. "Damian?" "Don't scare her," he chuckled. "I'm just being realistic. A woman alone with that kind of money. Criminals notice." I sipped my water, slowly, never breaking eye contact. "Thanks for the concern. I'll let my security camera know." He blinked. Just once, but it was enough. Tessa cleared her throat, trying to salvage the performance. "Mom, we were thinking you could move closer to us. Maybe we help manage things for you. Bills, maintenance, taxes. You shouldn't have to deal with that at your age." "At my age," I repeated, amused. "What age would that be, the one where my brain still works, or the one where you think it doesn't?" She flinched slightly. "That's not what I meant." "Sure it was," I said quietly. "You just didn't mean to say it out loud." The silence stretched thin like the space before glass shatters. Damian leaned back, voice lower now. "Olivia, we're not enemies here. We're family. We can protect what's yours. Protect it from who I asked. You." He laughed too loud, too slick. "Come on, you don't really think we'd ever take advantage of you, wouldn't you?" I asked. Because so far, that's the only consistent thing you two have done together. The waitress returned with menus, but no one touched them. The tension at the table was thick enough to butter toast. Damian folded his hands, his voice dropping an octave. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "Am I?" I said. "Because from where I'm sitting, I'm the only one paying for lunch." He smiled again, that same smile I'd seen in courtrooms and commercials, the one that never reached his eyes. You know, stubbornness is dangerous, Olivia. It closes doors that shouldn't be closed. Funny, I said, standing up, because it also locks out thieves. Tessa's hand shot out, gripping my wrist. Mom, please. Don't leave angry. I'm not angry, I said softly. I'm disappointed. There's a difference. She looked up at me, the fake charm slipping from her face. We just want to help. Help yourselves, maybe. I took my coat, dropped a $5 bill on the table for the water, and turned to walk away. Behind me, I heard Damien mutter, "If she won't share, she'll surrender." The words froze me mid-step, but I didn't turn around. Outside, the sun hit me square in the eyes, blinding for a moment. I inhaled deeply, letting the smell of gasoline and fryer oil cut through the unease. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from recognition. Patrick used to warn me people who talk about protection are usually planning a robbery. I believed him more with every passing minute. As I crossed the parking lot, I caught a reflection in the diner's glass window. Tessa watching me, her expression unreadable. Beside her, Damien whispered something and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. She nodded, eyes distant. The moment sent a chill down my spine. I climbed into my truck, turned the ignition, and watched them through the windshield. Damien stood, paid the waitress, and smiled as if nothing had happened. The man could probably charm a jury while robbing them blind. When they finally walked out, I stayed still. I didn't want them to see me waiting. Instead, I watched as Damien opened the car door for Tessa, kissed her cheek, and whispered something that made her smirk again, the kind of smirk that used to belong to a daughter, but now belonged to someone else entirely. I knew then that whatever they were planning, it wasn't over, and whatever came next, I wouldn't be caught off guard again. As I pulled out of the diner lot, the radio crackled to life with an old country song about broken promises and empty pockets. I turned up the volume and smiled faintly. Let them plot. I've survived worse storms than greedy children. I didn't sleep at all the night after the Maple Diner incident. Damien's words kept echoing in my head. If she won't share, she'll surrender. That kind of threat doesn't leave your bloodstream. It lingers humming quietly beneath your skin. So the next evening, I packed a small overnight bag and drove across the gravel road to Nora's house. She opened the door in her robe curlers in her hair, and an expression that said she'd already predicted this exact visit. "Liv Byrne," she said, ushering me in. "You look like you saw a ghost." "Two, actually," I said, "and one of them wears cologne that could peel paint." Nora shut the door, locking it twice. "Come on, you're staying here tonight. I'll protect you with my frying pan and Wi-Fi." I laughed in spite of everything. Good combo. One for bruises, one for alibis. "That's the spirit," she said, patting my shoulder. "Now let's watch Jeopardy and pretend your family isn't plotting financial homicide." We stayed up late, half joking, half strategizing. Nora suggested buying a taser. I settled for coffee and distance. She offered her guest room, the one that still smelled faintly of lavender and newspaper. But even there, under the comfort of her floral quilt, I couldn't shake the sense that something was moving in the dark plans being drawn somewhere I couldn't see. The next morning, I drove back home. The closer I got, the heavier my chest felt. The pine trees looked different, too, still too expectant. When my house came into view, my stomach turned to stone. The front door was cracked open. For a long moment, I didn't move. I just sat there in the truck engine, idling, staring at the splintered frame where the lock used to be. Then instinct, old mechanical ingrained, took over. I cut the engine, grabbed my phone, and stepped out quietly. Inside, the air felt violated. Drawers were open, cushions thrown aside. My papers, insurance forms, old letters, bills scattered like a storm had passed through. And under the bed, the metal box that had once been tucked neatly behind a storage crate had been dragged halfway out. It was open. The documents were still there, but shuffled like someone had been looking for something specific. The photograph of Patrick had been tossed on the floor face down. That's when it hit me. The only person who still had an old key to this house was Logan. I called Nora right away. Someone broke in. Her voice sharpened instantly. "Call the cops, I will, but there's nothing missing, just disturbed. Disturbed is enough, Liv. Don't you dare stay there tonight. I'll be fine. I'm calling a locksmith right now. The locksmith said he could come the next morning. Too busy today." That left me with one more night in a house that no longer felt like mine. That evening, I dragged Patrick's old baseball bat from the hall closet and placed it beside my bed. The wood was scarred, the grip frayed, but it still felt steady in my hands. Before going to sleep, I wedged a chair under the doorknob and left the hallway light on. The glow cast long shadows over the walls, shadows that moved when I breathed too fast. At one point, I thought I heard footsteps outside gravel crunching softly, but when I looked through the window, there was nothing except the empty road and the pale wash of moonlight. Still, I didn't put the bat down. When morning finally came, I was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with cold coffee and bloodshot eyes, when I heard the sound of a truck pulling up outside. But it wasn't the locksmith. It was Eddie Byrne, my late husband's cousin. 55. A kind man who repaired radios and swore that every problem in life could be fixed with duct tape and caffeine. He climbed out of his old pickup waving. "Liv, you decent," barely, I said, opening the door. "If you're here about the chickens, they're fine." "I'm not here for chickens," he said grimly, stepping inside. "We need to talk." Eddie never looked nervous. He had the easy calm of someone who could rewire a bomb with a paper clip, but right now he was pale. "I was at Copper Bar last night," he said, "having a beer after work. I didn't plan on overhearing anything, but—" "Liv, you need to sit down." My stomach dropped. "Who your boy?" he said quietly. "Logan." He was there with two guys I didn't recognize. Big ones. Tattoos mean eyes. They were talking about you. I gripped the edge of the table. "What did they say?" "They were talking about some legal thing about making you sign papers. One of them said something about getting a doctor involved to prove you're not mentally capable of managing your finances." The air in the kitchen disappeared. Eddie continued, voice tight. "They used the term power of attorney, said if they could get you declared legally incompetent, the money would fall to your next of kin." My pulse roared in my ears. They want to declare me insane. He nodded grimly. Or unfit. Whatever word lets them take control. I sank into a chair. For a moment, the room tilted. Patrick's photo still lay on the counter, a faint crack across the glass from when it had fallen. I looked at it now, at his calm smile frozen in time. "Patrick," I whispered, "your kids have turned into strangers." Eddie rested a hand on my shoulder. "You've got to protect yourself, Liv. These guys mean business. You can't wait for them to act. I won't." The words came out steady, but my hands were trembling. I forced them to still. Eddie looked at me curiously. "What are you thinking?" I stood up, crossing the room to the drawer where I kept my legal folder, the one with my house deed tax records and bank contacts. I pulled it out, stacked the papers neatly, and felt something inside me shift, something steel hard. "They want paperwork," I said, looking Eddie dead in the eye. He nodded slowly. "Yeah." A cold smile touched my lips. "Then I'll give them paperwork." That night, I sat at my desk drafting letters, one to my lawyer, one to the bank, one to the county registrar. The clock ticked past midnight as I filled each page line by line with precision and calm fury. Every document would build a wall between me and their greed. Every signature would become a weapon. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, and the porch light flickered like it was warning me again. But this time, I didn't feel fear. I felt ready. By Monday morning, I was sitting in a law office that smelled like lemon polish and quiet authority. The brass nameplate on the desk read, "Harriet Klein, Attorney at Law, Elder Rights Specialist." She was in her late 50s, silver hair, cropped close eyes as sharp as a hawk's. The kind of woman who didn't waste adjectives or sympathy, just precision. "Mrs. Byrne," she said, extending her hand. "I've read your message. You said your children are planning to declare you mentally incompetent." "Yes," I replied, sliding the manila folder across the desk. "And they've already tried breaking into my house to find paperwork. My neighbor caught them snooping, and my cousin overheard their plans at a bar." Harriet adjusted her glasses and gave a small, humorless smile. Classic. Family betrayal with a side of paperwork. I exhaled shakily. I don't even recognize them anymore. Money changes people, she said. But so does power. Let's make sure they never get either. Harriet opened her legal pad, scribbled a few notes, then looked up. We'll move fast. They'll expect hesitation, not preparation. She tapped her pen against the desk twice, then spoke like she was reading from a manual of justice she'd written herself. Here's our plan. 3 steps. Clean, efficient, airtight. She held up a finger. Step 1, a comprehensive psychological evaluation. We'll have a state-certified neuropsychologist examine you, document your full mental competence, and notarize it. It becomes Exhibit A in any future court attempt, meaning if they try to call me senile, I've got the receipts. Exactly. She said, a flash of amusement in her eyes. Think of it as an anti-gaslighting certificate. She raised a second finger. Step 2, we establish an asset protection trust. That means the ownership of your money and property will legally transfer to a trust under your control. Your children can't access a penny without your signature. So even if they hire more crooks, the bank can't touch me. Not a dime, Harriet confirmed. The trust acts like a firewall. You become the grantor and the primary beneficiary. If anyone, especially your son, tries to contest it, the burden of proof falls on them, and I've seen their type. They fold faster than cheap patio chairs. I almost laughed. You sound like someone who's handled a lot of patio chairs. Let's just say I've represented enough parents to furnish a whole backyard, she replied dryly. Then she held up a third finger. Step 3, if they come near you again or send anyone to harass you, we file for a restraining order. In Idaho, elder harassment is taken seriously. Once granted, any contact from them, direct or indirect, becomes a criminal offense. She leaned back, tapping her pen once more. Let's protect you faster than your kids can Google guardianship. That made me laugh for real. A short surprise sound I hadn't heard from myself in weeks. We spent the next 2 hours in motion, Harriet dictating me signing. Every signature felt like armor being forged. She drafted affidavits, filed preliminary trust papers, and scheduled the psychological evaluation for Thursday morning. Between each task, she explained every detail with the calm clarity of a woman who had spent years outsmarting greed in designer suits. I found myself admiring her discipline, her steadiness. She reminded me of Patrick in some strange way, methodical, strategic, never losing altitude in chaos. When we took a break, she poured coffee from a silver thermos and handed me a cup. You seem surprisingly composed for someone whose family tried to stage a legal coup. I shrugged. I spent 20 years designing engine systems for aircraft. You learn that panic doesn't keep things in the air. Harriet smiled faintly. Then this will be easy for you. Paperwork is just flight control, get the angles right, and gravity works in your favor. By early afternoon, the trust documents were ready for initial signatures. Harriet placed them in front of me, neatly aligned. Do you want to read through every clause, or do you trust me? I've learned that trust isn't given. I said, taking the pen, but I think you've earned it. As I signed, I felt something shift deep inside. Not relief exactly, but reclamation. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to life. I was engineering it again. I looked up. You know what the worst part of all this is? Harriet tilted her head. Tell me. That they think being old means being helpless. Like wrinkles erase experience. Like love makes you stupid. She nodded. They confuse kindness for weakness. Happens all the time. But that's why we write things down. Paper doesn't forget. Neither do I said quietly. We finalized the plan before sunset. Harriet would courier the trust to the bank first thing tomorrow. The evaluation appointment was confirmed with Dr. Pierce, a neuropsychologist she trusted implicitly, and she'd already started drafting the restraining order template just in case the kids get creative. As I gathered my papers, Harriet reached across the desk, her tone softening just slightly. You're doing the right thing, Olivia. Most people wait until it's too late. You're acting now. I smiled faintly. You make it sound like a mission." "It is," she said. "A quiet one, but just as important. You're setting a precedent for every older person who's ever been underestimated." Outside, the sun dipped low behind the courthouse across the street, painting the windows gold. I stood for a moment, breathing in the cold air, watching people hurry along the sidewalks with their little worries, their unbroken illusions. I thought of Tessa's polished smile, Logan's clenched fists, Damien's oily threats, and realized none of them mattered as much as this. I still had control. I still had my name. That night back home, I sat at the dining table under the lamplight reviewing every page Harriet had prepared. The legal language was dense, but to me it read like music. Grantor retains full authority, irrevocable without her consent. Successor trustee to be appointed only by written declaration. Every line was a fortress. I took Patrick's old pen from its case, the one he'd used to sign his first pilot's contract, and held it for a long moment. Then, with steady hands, I wrote my name across the final page. Olivia Byrne. The ink glided smooth, final, decisive. For the first time in years, I wasn't surviving. I was fighting. The sound of the pen cap clicking shut felt like a gun being holstered. Outside, the wind rattled the pine trees. Inside, the paperwork lay silent but powerful. On the table, my new weapon, my invisible armor. The world might have thought I was just an old woman with too much sentiment and not enough strength. They'd soon learn what happens when an engineer designs her own defense. The camera in my hallway blinked once, recording in quiet rhythm. Somewhere faintly, the hum of justice began to build, and this time it had my signature on it. The day started too still, the kind of stillness that hums in your bones before the world decides to break it. The sun hung low over Boise, pale and cold. I was in the yard trimming dead branches from the apple tree Patrick and I had planted 30 years ago. It had outlived him, outlived our marriage, and apparently was about to outlive my patience too. I heard the first sound at 4:17 p.m., a truck engine, loud, unsteady, then a door slam, another, then footsteps, heavy ones. When I looked up, Logan was walking toward my porch, flanked by two men I'd never seen before. One was built like a brick wall, a jagged scar cutting through his cheek. The other had tattoos crawling up his neck, words I didn't want to read. Their names would come later from the police report Ray's scar and Vince's tattoo. But right then, all I saw were three men in trouble with legs. Mom Logan's voice cracked the quiet. "We need to talk." My body moved before my mind caught up. I ducked behind the apple tree phone in hand, heart pounding like a faulty motor. My first call was to Nora. "Liv," she answered immediately. "They're here," I whispered. "Logan and two strangers. Get inside, lock the doors." "I can't. They're already on the porch." Nora's voice sharpened. "Call the police. Now." I ended the call, dialed 911, and whispered every detail as I crouched behind the tree. The dispatcher's voice was calm. Too calm. "Stay on the line, ma'am. Units are en route." From where I hid, I could see Logan pacing near the steps, his voice carrying across the yard. "She's inside, Mom. I know you can hear me." Then another voice. Tessa's. She stepped out from a car I hadn't noticed before, her heels sinking into the gravel. She looked like a magazine cover gone wrong, hair-perfect expression. Panicked. "Mom, come out," she shouted. "We just want to talk." Her voice wavered at the end, but the damage was done. Ray turned to Logan. "You sure she's alone?" "Yeah," Logan muttered. "She's stubborn, but she'll open the door. She always does." "Not today," I whispered to myself. Ray stomped up the porch steps, pulled something from his jacket, and jammed it into the door frame, a crowbar. The sound of metal scraping wood sliced through the air. I felt the apple tree shake against my back from how hard I was breathing. Inside, the wind chime Patrick had made from old aircraft parts clanged weakly against the siding, like an alarm, small but defiant. "Hey, Tessa," hissed, looking around nervously. "Don't damage anything. This looks bad." Ray smirked. "It'll look worse if she calls the cops." Too late for that, I thought. The dispatcher's voice crackled in my ear. "Ma'am, officers are 2 minutes away. Stay hidden." Then it happened. Logan kicked the door once hard and shouted, "Mom, you're making this worse. Just come out and sign the damn papers." That was when I realized they weren't here for reconciliation. They were here for domination. The crowbar slipped the door, splintered. I flinched. My breath came in shallow bursts. I could almost feel Patrick's voice in my head. "Steady hands live. Never move faster than your aim." Through the branches, I saw blue flashing lights far down the road, and then sirens, loud, piercing, cutting through the Idaho silence like a blade. "Cops," Vince shouted. "We gotta go." Ray dropped the crowbar. "Move." The two of them bolted toward the truck gravel, flying like shrapnel. Logan turned, panic flaring in his eyes. "Wait," he yelled, but they were already gone, tires screaming dust, swallowing them whole. Then he turned back toward me, or rather toward the house, and something inside him snapped. He pounded on the door with his fists, once, twice, shouting my name. "Mom, you ruined everything." He didn't see me stepping out from behind the apple tree, my phone still in hand, 911 still connected. "Logan," I said, my voice calm but cold. "It's over. Step away from the house." He spun toward me. His face was red veins, pulsing tears, mixing with rage. "You did this!" he shouted. "You turned them against me. You think you can just take everything I took, nothing I said. You gave it away the moment you stopped being my son." He lunged. It wasn't graceful or planned, just raw anger in motion. His shoulder hit me square in the chest. The world tilted, my breath vanished, and I hit the ground hard. Pain exploded in my ribs, a sharp tearing sound that I knew too well. The same ribs he'd broken once before. This time there was no hesitation. The years of motherhood forgiveness, excuses, they all evaporated in a single second. Somewhere above me, tires screeched again, but not from his truck, from police cruisers. The yard flooded with blue and red light. "Police, step away from her." Logan froze, panting, his fists clenched. For a moment, I saw confusion flicker across his face like a child caught breaking a toy he didn't mean to. Then the officers rushed him. One grabbed his arm, another twisted his wrist behind his back. Logan resisted, shouting, "She's crazy, she's manipulating." He never finished. They slammed him down, cuffed him, and read his rights as he struggled against the dirt. Tessa stood a few yards away, trembling. Her mascara streaked her voice small. "Mom." "I didn't know he'd stop," I said, cutting her off. My voice came out steady despite the pain. "You both made your choices." She covered her face with her hands. An officer helped me sit up. "Ma'am, are you hurt? Just my ribs?" I whispered, wincing. "They've been through worse." "Ambulance is on the way," he said gently. I nodded, then looked at Logan. My son on his knees in the dirt wrists, bound, eyes wild. He looked at me like he wanted to say something, but no sound came out. I steadied myself, breathing through the pain, and met his gaze one last time. "You had your chance to be my son?" I said, my voice like steel. "Now you'll face me as a plaintiff." The officers led him toward the cruiser. Tessa tried to follow, but one of them stopped her for questioning. The wind picked up, carrying dust and sirens down the road. I looked at the apple tree, its branches trembling but still standing, just like me. As the ambulance doors closed and the paramedic asked for my name, I spoke clearly without hesitation. "Olivia Byrne," I said. "Victim and witness." The sirens wailed again as we pulled away, fading into the Idaho sky. And for the first time in a long while, the silence that followed didn't feel like fear. It felt like justice. The world came back to me through a haze of antiseptic and beeping monitors. White ceiling, pale blue curtains, the faint hum of machines that sounded almost like breathing. For a moment, I couldn't tell if I was awake or still trapped in the echo of Logan's shout. Then came a voice, firm, familiar, grounding. "Don't even think about getting up," said Harriet Klein, standing at the foot of my hospital bed. Her silver hair was perfectly in place, her posture straight enough to scare paperwork into alignment. "You've got 2 cracked ribs, a bruised shoulder, and a police file thicker than my law degree." I tried to smile. Then I guess the paperwork fought back harder than expected. She pulled up a chair, setting a folder on her lap. "You did good, Olivia. The police report, the security footage, the prior trust filings, all of it lines up. Logan's been charged with elder abuse, criminal intimidation, and conspiracy to defraud. He's currently being held without bail. I swallowed hard. Tessa Harriet exhaled slowly. No charges yet. The DA believes she was manipulated by her husband and brother, but she'll have to testify. And Damien. Her lips curved into a dry smile. Funny you ask. He tried to disappear, moved money through shell accounts, ditched his office. But the FBI picked him up in Oregon this morning. Turns out our Mr. Reed had been running a nice little side business called investor misappropriation. He's facing federal charges. I closed my eyes. So it's all coming full circle. Justice takes time, Harriet said, standing, but it always lands eventually. Later that afternoon, the nurse left me alone to rest. The TV in the corner played softly some local news report about rising gas prices, but I wasn't listening. Through the window, I could see the foothills stretching pale and quiet under the winter sun. Snow was melting, trickling down into the gutters outside. The world looked new again. Then the door opened and Nora Fields walked in, carrying a paper bag and a grin that could light up Idaho. "Well, if it isn't our local celebrity," she said, "half the town's talking about you. You're practically a one-woman Law and Order episode." I chuckled weakly. "Don't tell me they're selling tickets." "Please," she said, placing the bag on the table. "You think I wouldn't charge admission? Anyway, I brought you soup, real chicken. Not that hospital mystery sludge." The smell hit me immediately. Garlic thyme. A hint of comfort. She pulled a chair beside me, her expression softening. "You scared me, Liv. When they said Logan was arrested, I know, I said quietly. I thought that too." We sat in silence for a moment. Then she asked, "So what happens now?" "The money. The trust. All that." That was when I decided to tell her everything. "Nora." I began, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. I never wanted the land for myself. I kept it all those years because it reminded me of Patrick, the place he used to test those old helicopter engines. I was going to sell it quietly and use the proceeds for something else. She tilted her head. Something else? Yes. I reached for the folder Harriet had left at the foot of my bed. Inside were the blueprints of my real plan, the Olivia Hope Trust. Her eyes widened as she read the title. "What is this?" "A Foundation," I said. "A scholarship program for women, especially widows or single mothers, who want to retrain in technical or engineering fields. You'd be surprised how many of us can fix broken engines, but not broken chances." Nora blinked fast, then looked up, her voice trembling slightly. "You were going to do all that." "In secret, I wanted it to be quiet," I said. "No press, no plaques, just opportunity." Patrick always believed in giving women their own wings, not waiting for someone else to lift them. Tears welled in Nora's eyes before she laughed softly. "You're turning pain into propulsion." I smiled at that. Patrick always said, "Keep engines running even when hearts stall." For a long while, neither of us spoke. The hum of the IV and the muffled sounds of nurses down the hall filled the silence. Finally, Nora wiped her eyes and asked, "What will you do when you're out of here?" "Finish what I started," I said. "Harriet's already helping set up the trust legally. Once it's finalized, the scholarships will launch in Patrick's name and mine. I want the first recipients to start next fall." Nora squeezed my hand. "You're something else, Olivia Byrne. Most people get knocked down by family and crawl into hiding. You turn it into an engineering project for justice." "I guess old habits die hard," I said. "When something's broken, I fix it, even if it's just the way people think about women like us." The door opened again and Harriet reappeared holding more documents. "Sorry to interrupt the love fest," she said, smirking. "Just need Olivia's signature on the trust confirmation." Nora grinned. "She's been practicing her autograph." Harriet handed me the pen. "You're officially establishing the Olivia Hope Trust. Once this is filed, your assets are locked in perpetuity for the foundation. No one, not Logan, not Tessa, not even you, can revoke it without unanimous trustee approval." I signed the line carefully, the pen gliding smoothly across the page. The sound reminded me of engines starting steady, certain. Harriet nodded. "Congratulations. You've built something indestructible." "Not indestructible," I said softly, setting the pen down. "Just resilient." That evening, the hospital lights dimmed, casting long shadows on the walls. I lay back, listening to the faint thrum of the city outside. In my dreams, I saw Patrick again, standing in his old flight jacket, smiling that quiet smile of his. He didn't say anything this time. He just nodded as if to say, "You did good live." When I woke, dawn was spilling through the blinds. The snow had melted completely, leaving the asphalt dark and clean. The world kept moving, engines running, hearts still mending. And for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel like a victim of time or blood. I felt like a builder again. Nora returned later with coffee and a small notepad. "You should write this down someday," she said. "Call it something like, 'The Woman Who Engineered Her Own Justice.'" I smiled. "Maybe. But for now, I'll let the paperwork speak." She grinned. Oh, it already did, loud and clear. We clinked our paper cups together like champagne flutes, the steam rising between us. Somewhere beyond the hospital walls, the first application for the Olivia Hope Trust was probably being written by a woman I hadn't met yet, someone whose life was about to change. And maybe that was enough. Justice didn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looked like creation. A full year passed before I realized that silence no longer scared me. The world had resumed its rhythm. The seasons rolled through Idaho. The apple tree bloomed again, and my ribs had healed with the slow precision only age can teach. Some days they still ached in the rain, but that ache felt like memory, not pain. And me, I could finally walk upright without wincing both in body and spirit. The Olivia Hope Trust had officially turned 1 year old that morning. 42 women widows, single mothers, and women who had lost their jobs after 40 were now enrolled in mechanical and technical training programs across the state. Every week, my inbox filled with stories that made my heart expand. A woman who learned to weld after 30 years of homemaking. Another who became the first female technician at her local power plant. One who wrote, "I fixed my son's bike yesterday, and for the first time he said he was proud of me." That line alone made every sleepless night worth it. Harriet called that morning, her tone brisk but proud. "You know you've created a monster," she said. "The applications for next semester have tripled. I'm getting calls from 3 other states asking if they can replicate your model." "I told you," I said, smiling. "Engines run better once they start moving." She chuckled. "And how's our favorite reformed felon doing Logan?" I paused, glancing at the envelope on my desk. He wrote again. There were 5 letters so far, each one more careful than the last. The latest arrived last week, written in neat, deliberate handwriting that looked nothing like the scrawl he used to sign bad checks with. "Mom," it began, "they're making us work in the wood shop here. The counselor says building something helps us rebuild ourselves. I think he's right. I know I broke more than ribs last year. I broke your trust. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope to earn peace someday." I read it twice the day it came, then tucked it under Patrick's photo. Maybe redemption had its own kind of slow engineering. Tessa had changed too. After the trial, she moved to Twin Falls and took a job at a senior care center. Harriet told me she was taking night classes in counseling, specializing in elder support. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. One afternoon she called and said, "I didn't understand what patience looked like until now. Some of them just need someone to listen, Mom. The same way you used to listen to me before I stopped deserving it. I didn't say much, just keep listening. Forgiveness, like rust removal, takes time and pressure in equal measure." Around noon, Nora Fields showed up at my doorstep carrying a pie and her usual mischief. She was wearing one of her floral sun hats even though it was barely 50 degrees. "Well, look who's walking without creaking," she said. "You're officially bionic." I laughed, opening the door wider. "And you're still nosy. Come in." She stepped inside, glancing at the walls lined with new photographs, women in work uniforms, welding helmets, and lab coats. "So these are your engineers of hope," she said softly. "Every single one of them," I replied. Some came from halfway across the state. One even drove her old truck 4 hours to hand-deliver a thank you letter. Nora's eyes sparkled. You know, Liv, if Patrick could see this, he'd probably build you a plane just so you could fly over and check on them all. He would, I said, smiling, and he'd still forget to refuel halfway. We both laughed until the air warmed again. She wandered into the kitchen, opened my old cupboard, and gasped. No secret cash box, no metal tins under the bed anymore. I poured her coffee and handed her a mug. No, I've stopped hiding money under the bed. Oh, she teased. Then where do you hide it? Now I smiled, stirring my coffee. I don't. Now I hide hope under paperwork. Nora blinked, then burst into laughter, setting down her cup before she spilled it. You're unbelievable, Liv. You've turned bureaucracy into poetry. Occupational hazard, I said. Patrick used to say I could make a flight manual sound romantic. Guess he wasn't wrong. The afternoon sun dipped low, scattering gold through the apple branches outside. I looked out the window and saw one of the new interns from the Trust's first scholarship wave pull up in a van with our logo on the side, Hope Has a Motor. They were delivering rebuilt generators to a women's shelter downtown using the same land money my children once fought over. For the first time, I realized the land had found its real purpose, not as inheritance, but as ignition. As the sky darkened, Nora leaned back in her chair, eyeing me with that mischievous look again. You ever think about retiring for real? Maybe take a trip. Find yourself a nice gentleman with good posture and bad hearing. I laughed. No, thank you. I already have enough broken machinery to maintain. She raised her mug. To engines that still run, I raised mine. And to friends who never stall. That night after she left, I sat at my desk and opened my journal for the first time in months. I wrote slowly, carefully, the way I'd learned to write again after pain. Money can buy roofs, but dignity builds walls, and mine are finally solid. I set the pen down and looked at the stack of envelopes beside it. Applications, thank you letters, legal updates. They were proof that life could rebuild itself from the wreckage if you gave it the right tools. Before bed, I stepped outside. The night air was crisp, filled with the faint hum of crickets and the smell of damp earth. The apple tree swayed gently in the breeze, its branches heavy with blossoms again. Patrick used to say, engines and hearts, they both need fuel and forgiveness. I think I finally understood what he meant. If you believe age doesn't mean weakness, hit subscribe and share this story. And that was the story of Olivia Byrne, a woman who turned betrayal into blueprints and pain into propulsion. If this story moved, you take a moment to share it. Your voice helps these stories travel further to every heart that still believes in quiet strength, dignity, and justice. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? We love seeing our community grow across cities, states, and oceans. And if you believe age doesn't mean weakness, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and join us for the next story of courage and redemption. Because on this channel, we don't just tell stories, we rebuild faith in what's good.